Okay, so we are ready to begin the library preparation of these whole genomic bacterial isolate DNA samples. We have a rough quantification, which should be helpful, and we are going to sequence multiple 3 isolates. We'll also do a control on a min-ion, the larger flow cell. We are using barcodes, so we have 3 barcoded samples plus the control, and we're ready to go. I've got the items thawed. I think I have just about everything with me. Of course, there's a really wonderful protocol, and we'll have an annotated version of that for folks to look at. So I'm just going to go ahead and begin and try to do this live and not mix up too many things. The first thing that we want to do is, as you could see here, have all of the reagents out and getting them starting to thaw. Some of them have very specific instructions, as you can imagine. Some of the ones like this, where there are some salts and ATP and et cetera in the buffers, those things can sort of rest on the ice, but they're very specific directions here as to how you should mix or not mix things. For example, obviously enzymes are quite sensitive, and so you wouldn't want to vortex those in order to get them mixed. So just follow along the warnings here and be careful. Another thing that I would say to keep in mind as you're doing this is as you'll add reagents and work with things, and we're going to be a number of incubations and enzymatic steps, the protocol is usually pretty specific to add things in the correct order, and that'll probably keep the pHs where they need to be. So in general, also, I'll be using, for a lot of these steps where it's appropriate, unless it's a PCR tube, I'll be using these low bind tubes. Now, the first thing it tells me to do is to work with my control sample and to get that ready. So it asks me to prepare the control sample, and I'm going to need 105 microliters of elution buffer to prepare one of the control sample tubes. And I'm going to add that and get that ready. You don't have to use a control. It is there for troubleshooting purposes. It's probably quite dilute. And the other thing that is mentioning here, worth noting here is that we are only using, in our case, 4 microbial samples. So hopefully that increases the amount of coverage that we get, the coverage and sequencing depth, which would be good for an assembly that we could attempt. But of course, you do have to think through these things carefully. The absolute number of libraries that you can prep, there are some limiting reagents. Now, interestingly, Nanopore does sell some of those reagents separately, so sometimes you can get a little bit more out of the kit. But in one sense, we're only going to be using, 4 or so of the potential barcodes. And so really, when you have a barcoded kit, ideally, you are going to be using close to the maximum number of barcodes that kit supports. Otherwise, depending on how you think about it, there is the potential for waste. So just be careful, be mindful of that. I'm going to mark this one off because I've now prepared it. Okay. So the next thing we need to do is to get our DNA sample and also prepare these things. Now, the way that it works with the barcodes is that we have the barcodes in this foil tray, so we're going to go ahead and use those barcodes. What we'll notice is that some of the reagents as listed to prepare the very first enzymatic reaction, where we're prepping the ends of the DNAs in order to receive the next adapters, there are amounts that are too small to actually work on with most pipettes. Maybe a P2, you could do it. But essentially what you're going to want to do is make up some type of master mix so that everything can work properly. So I'm going to go ahead and take my DNA sample, I need 11 microliters, and I need to use approximately 1,000 nanograms per sample and make it up to 11 microliters. So I'm going to have 4 of those. I'm going to have in each one of these barcodes, so I'm only using really 3 barcoded samples. 1 microliter of that is going to be that diluted control. Then the repair buffer, FFPE repair buffer, and the NPrep, those are 2 separate things that you need. So let's just check that we have them because they do not come with the kit. So we need the FFPE DNA repair buffer. Great. We need the we need the Ultra NPrep reaction buffer. Let's get that. Great. We need the Ultra NPrep enzyme mix, and we need the FFPE repair mix. Great. And that's going to be for a total of those enzymes plus the diluted and plus the DNA sample. The other thing it mentions when it says to make those things, it suggests directly that you can make up a master mix for the total number of samples and then end up adding 3 microliters of that to each well. So I'm going to go ahead and do those calculations and then go ahead and get started. First, I'll start with my DNA samples. I'm going to dilute those and make them up to 11 microliters each, but a total of approximately 1,000 nanograms based upon what my calculations told me. So I'll actually start by adding water. Then I'll add DNA to each one. If you recall, DNA is quite viscous, so it's hard even to measure accurately what I think I'm getting, but this is like the one time where yeah, I might have too much DNA and it's actually be fine if I lose some. I'm going to try to make sure it is as homogeneous as I can, but it's still quite jelly-like. The good news, again, of course, being that I have so much DNA that should I need to come back to this and repeat anything, I am embarrassed for choice here. I've got plenty of DNA to work with. I'm going to try to really mix that well by pipetting. It's just so much DNA. I shouldn't be too afraid of shearing. It can actually help the ligation process, as I mentioned earlier. So just make sure this is as homogeneous as I can get it. It's really quite jelly-like. It has, like, you know, the consistency. It's even, to me, a little bit thicker than, like, you know, saliva. Okay, and number 20. Just mix it. really, it's so thick that actually it's almost like when I pull away, it's like it's pulling out of the pipette tip with a little trail of like a mucus-like trail. I'm gonna try twisting the pipette to break the mucus, and I think I got something that looks like the right amount. And it's trying to just make this as mixed as I can. It is, some reason, this is number 20, and whereas earlier on in our dealings, per se, number 4 was the one that was so viscous. Somehow, after all of today's reactions, number 20 is really, really viscous. All right, we'll see how it works. All right, to each one of those, I do feel comfortable going ahead and adding 1 microliter of the control sample. That was prepared and diluted with the elution buffer. So it's sort of like a spike in. We'll have to remove this later on in terms of bioinformatics, but nothing enzymatic so far, so I haven't really shifted this to the ice, but I'm going to now make room and try to keep things on the ice. These are really quite, thawing, and the things that are really the enzymes are the ones that I'm most worried about making sure that they are in full contact with the ice. Okay, I've got my samples, so now I'm going to go ahead and make my master mix. Still want that to be kind of cool. I'm going to just make a little bit of room here. And then for everything else, I'll go ahead and make enough there for 5 microliters. Or five reactions, even though I'm going to be using just 3. All right, FFE PE repair buffer. And a couple of really good flicks. Try to make sure things are dissolved. There is some salt and ATP or whatever else there is that won't quite ever fully dissolve, so you don't have to be super worried about that. Okay, that's item 1. Same amount of the NPrep reaction buffer. Make sure everything is fully melted and fully dissolved. Okay, 0.75 of the enzyme mix. and of the repair mix. Okay, so doing this, each one of the samples is going to get 3 microliters of this master mix. And I want to really make sure that I mix it as well as I can with a couple of pipettes up and down. And it was so viscous. Okay, that one is ready. Continue. And the final one. And I've got my thermocycler, which I will just need to incubate. I don't really see need to spin down here. I'll have that. There will be times when I will want, but everything is really such small amounts and it looks good. It was mixed. So this is going to do 20 degrees to incubate, basically room temperature for 5 minutes, and then inactivate for 5 minutes at 65. And then we'll transfer to another tube for a cleanup step. There's 2, I think, rounds of bead cleanups after these enzymatic reactions. So not super difficult, detail oriented, but that's about it. So I'll see you after the incubation. So we have completed that enzymatic step. And what we need to do now is transfer from the PCR tubes into some low bind tubes that I've already labeled so that we can do the magnetic bead cleanup. So we should have approximately 15 microliters for each sample. So go ahead and do the transfer. And it's important at this point too also, the beads would have already been thawed, hopefully. And then also you gotta make sure that they're really well mixed, they settle quickly. You can use a vortexer. These are quite fresh, so using my hands, it just all sort of worked. So that's what I'll rely on. Also at this point too, I don't think that there's an extreme need to keep that on ice while we're working with this. Okay, and we are adding basically an equal amount, if I'm correct. Yeah, 15 microliters of the beads. Thankfully, these are part of the kit. The beads can be kind of expensive on their own. There are some alternatives out there, but since it's included, you probably have more than enough. So I'm going to add 15 microliters to each one. Okay, so the magnetic beads essentially are going to, well, the coating of the bead is something that's going to attract DNA, but the enzymes and all the other stuff that we don't want to bring along to the next step are going to be more easily washed away. So this acts essentially as a clean. I'm going to set a timer. This happens at room temperature for about 5 minutes. And it says that you could use a hula mixer, so to keep it shaking every minute or so, I'll just give it a tap to make sure that it is mixed. And I'll go ahead and set a timer for 5 minutes. So that has incubated with the magnetic beads. This is the end prep step. And the next thing we're going to do is spin this down to try to get the beads to the bottom. And then we're going to wash away the things that we don't need. I can already see clumps of beads here, likely because, again, this is some really viscous high molecular weight DNA. One thing that I should have mentioned earlier, but you would have seen if you read the protocol, is that with the wash step, we're going to use some 80% freshly made ethanol. So I made a bunch, and I guess just like always, when you are working on a protocol like this, there's always something to be done during the downtime, so you could have gotten that ready. It says to spin down and pellet. It doesn't really say how long. I think 30 seconds is going to be fine, where it's not so much here to try to get a really compact pellet. I think that they'll happen without too much help, but we just want to make sure that the beads are all down on one side of the tube, and then we'll use a magnetic rack to go ahead and really isolate them as we do the washes with the 80% ethanol. You also need a second set of low bind tubes, so if you haven't prepared those, you have a moment. Make sure that you get those done. So at this point, I'm going to switch to making sure that everything is on the magnetic rack. There's another video where I also use the magnetic rack, and I get some really good close-ups of what things look like. If you haven't seen or you want to see more detail, I'm not going to do that this time. So please see some of the other videos that have a little bit more of a close-up. I will do for the min-ion loading, since we haven't done one of those yet. So the key thing here, when I look at this, I mean, I really am getting a very clear pellet on the side. And I'm going to keep everything with the hinge facing back towards the magnet. So I'll put those in, and from my vantage point, I clearly see that little small pellet. Clearly going and just sitting at the magnet. Depending on which camera, you may or may not get something of an angle, so I'm holding it just in case, but I see it clearly. Now, interestingly, and if you haven't watched the other videos about this wash, what we're going to do is the wash is taking out that supernatant and then literally letting you're not trying to aim for the pellet, you're just going to immerse it in this 80% ethanol, 200 microliters. So we don't want to disturb it, and we're going to do that twice. And you put it in, you take it out. It's very gentle, so you don't have to. Sometimes I know the word wash kind of implies that you're going to be doing more than that, but that's not the case here. What I will say, one, we want to avoid contamination. One, well, even before 1.0, we don't take the tube off of the rack. We just pipette away what we don't need. Now, if you notice what I'm also doing, I am making sure that I close it immediately, because there's a little bit of danger here. The pellet can dry off quickly, and if the pellet dries, the DNA will never come off of those magnetic beads. You'll never get it back. So you want to work quickly in these steps, and also keep it covered when we don't want the pellet to dry off. There's some steps where you might let it dry for a few seconds, but this isn't one of them. Towards the end, when we're all done with the washes, you can let it dry out just a bit. So I'm going to add 200 microliters, and I don't even add it to hit the pellet. I'm literally trying to immerse the pellet. So I do not want to, I let it drip down the opposite side. Just immersing it. Then I pull all that out and do it again. Now this time I think I'll be able to work quickly enough. I'm not so worried about closing the cap in between, but just work quickly. I only have 3 samples, and some of that liquid, I'm not taking it fully out, so there's always some that remains. But we do this wash twice. I'm just going to double check. I'm pretty sure I know what comes next, but okay, we just immerse it. Okay, so we've done that twice. And it says here that we want to remove the ethanol and spin it down just to get that little last drops down to the bottom. And we are then going to resuspend it in water. And I've got some nuclease-free water. So I'll put this aside. There are more bead washes down the road. I am going to remove the 200 and cap it immediately. I still am gonna, in this cases, change tips because, you know, there could be a chance for cross-contamination. I do not want that. No air bubbles in here when I'm taking things out. Okay, this can go for a short spin. The goal here is just to get any residual ethanol down to the bottom so that I could more easily pipette up, let's say, the 5 or 10 microliters that might stick to the bottom. Does not have to be a long spin. 5 seconds is going to be enough. I'm going to take my smaller pipette. I might as well set it to 10 because I'm about to add 10 of water. And I'm going to do this quickly because it says allow to dry for 30 seconds, so that'll work. I'm going to put this back onto the magnet. And sort of at eye level, I'm going to go in and try to make sure that I've removed any visible drop of ethanol, but I'm going to hold this and just keep the magnet. Of water. Now this time you do want that water to roll over the bead, and in fact we're gonna flick it. In my head I was doing a rough count of 30 seconds, so I'm not letting it dry for more than 30 seconds even though the lid is open right now. I touch the water to it. I'm going to close that right up. And then I'm going to go in and really make sure that the bead, which right now is a little dot on the side, I want it to be completely resuspended. I'm flicking it now off the magnet. I'm going to go in. I want the other ones. I don't want to wait too long to do the flicking. And one of them, the first one, didn't completely go back into solution. The second one kind of fell apart, but the first one is going to need a couple more flicks. And what you're looking for is, I can clearly see little clumps of beads. I do not want that. I don't want to be, how would you say, rough, but I really want to be thorough, that I don't have clumps of beads. I don't want to be so violent that things end up on the lid, that have to spin it down, which, I mean, I could spin these down for a few seconds, but what I really want to see is that I'm getting fully brown, no clumps of beads, everything is really completely resuspended. And it needs to sit for 2 minutes at room temperature. This one is a little bit more recalcitrant, but it'll start to break up. Okay, I'm gonna leave that for 2 minutes at room temperature. Now the protocol says to spin it down. I see that everything is spun, you know, it doesn't need spinning down. It's really quite well distributed, but I'll gently for 2-3 seconds spin this. Really make sure everything is down at the bottom. I'm not looking for a pellet per se, but just everything is down at the bottom. And then I'm going to go onto the magnet. And once it's on the magnet, what I want is it's gonna naturally, it'll take you know, a minute or two, but you are gonna go from a brown solution to all of the beads being pulled up like a teardrop on the side of the tube, and that liquid that's left over is your purified clean DNA. So I already have some labeled tubes that I've labeled CEP, cleaned end prep reaction. So those are labeled, and I'm going to take that 10 microliters and transfer it. According to the protocol, this is a point at which you could take a microliter and then go ahead and use a qubit to quantitate it. I don't think I've ever done that. You could to make sure that you haven't lost anything, but if I've lost something, then I'm doing something really bad, and I'm probably not going to have much success for the rest of the protocol. So I'll be lazy there, and I'll save some losses. The other thing is that this is also a good point to stop. It mentions that you could go ahead and store it at 4 degrees C overnight. I'm going to keep going because I want this to have a chance to run overnight. So I'll let it go. As this is happening, I can see, for example, a difference in speed at which the beads, I'm not gonna unfortunately do much of a close-up here. It's really a detail. It's a little bit harder to see with my camera setup, except I change it. But there is a difference in speed at which the beads clear, and that is related to the viscosity. Clearly number 20, which I've already seen has issues, if I could use that, is taking longer. 19 went almost right away, and number 4 is just about done now. So I'll leave that for a minute until the liquid looks totally clear and I have a precise pinpoint of that solution or of the beads on the side. So I'll give it another minute and then I will move on. The next step, so we basically enzymatically purified, or rather prepared the ends of the DNA in order to allow us to do the next step, ligation, more efficiently. But it's going to be really similar. We have a couple of things that we need to add, some incubation, bead cleanup, and wash, rinse, repeat. Maybe that's literally. So I'll go ahead. It looks to me ready to transfer, and that will complete this step for me. But as I said, if you like to, this is a chance to do quantification with a qubit, and also a chance to stop and keep that before resuming the next day. As we do the transfer, we keep it on the magnetic rack because otherwise things will start to come back into solution. So it's only 10 microliters. And you're going to end up with a lot, have some system of how you name your tubes, like I did with cleaned end prep. Now we're going to do ligation and then cleaned ligation, so on and so forth. Have some way to name things because you're going to end up with lots of tubes with similar names, and you don't want to miss a step or accidentally take something that came from a step that is not the right step for what you're trying to do. 20 is looking good now. It took its time for sure. Now, even when I took this, I'll note that a little bit of beads tried to come over because of the viscosity. I don't want beads anywhere in my next reactions to kind of compete. So as soon as I saw it come back up, I pushed it back out. So I'm off by like a microliter or so here. I'll add some water. But just a little what to do tip. That's my recommendation anyway. I think I'll be fine. All right, that's it. So we are ready to go ahead and add the adapters to the DNA that has already been end prepped. I've got some labeled tubes and things with thawed. So it's a pretty straightforward reaction. I have where I'm going to be using 7.5 microliters of the DNA, the cleaned end prep DNA, which I already have in my low bind tubes from before. I'm going to be using the barcode. So here is a tray of barcodes. This comes with this black tray. I like to repackage the Nanopore stuff, but this cover is mine, so that's not what yours may look like. There is a little grid layout here. The way that this is laid out, first let me get in the right orientation. You can use this little guide to figure out what is the barcodes that you're going to be using. It repeats, each you get 2 plates, 96 well plates, but every third or so row is blank. So you start with A1 being barcode number 1, so on and so forth. So I'm gonna not really be a psychopath and use the numbers that correspond to the ones I'm using today, 4, 19, and 20. I'm just gonna say that 1 is gonna be 4, 2 is gonna be sample isolate 19, and 3 is gonna be 20. So I've got 3 empty tubes for the reaction, PCR tubes for reaction half, and I need 7.5 microliters of my DNA. So since you had 10, I guess with the qubit and everything, it should be more than enough. Definitely don't want any cross-contamination here. I guess once we barcode everything, we can pool, but this is not that point yet, so things need to remain separate. Although it does, it's late in the evening as I'm filming this, and I am definitely pleased by the fact that pretty soon I will be able to pool these, so I'll have even less liquid handling ahead of me for the evening. Okay, so I have my 7.5. Now I am going to add 2.5 of the barcodes. They're in these foil covered plates, and I just pierce. So we'll go into A1. You can tap them, I guess, if you have a plate spinner, you could do that, but That works pretty well. Of course, I would be more impressed if I had actually gotten the first one right. This one is really on the side of the tube, so maybe I should have used a plate spinner. Let me tap it a couple times. I only need 2.5 microliters. There we go. I'm looking at it, and it really is on the side of the tube. This is like evaporated, maybe in shipping. All right, I'm gonna go spin this down. Okay, let's try that again. Okay. And finally is 10 of the Blunt TA Master Mix. Gave a couple of pipettes up and down. It's quite a thick solution. And this is ultimately going to be at room temperature. So ice is not going to be necessary in a moment. All right, so I've pipetted. I don't see any need to spin down. Everything is pretty much at the bottom, pretty small amounts here. So that is going to sit at room temperature for 20 minutes. Then we'll come back and do some EDTA to stop that. But now is also a good time to check the flow cell, so I will do that, and that'll be part of another video.